Alex had always been someone who liked things in order. Every morning, he would wake up early, make himself a cup of coffee, and sit by the window in his modest but comfortable suburban home. The house wasn't anything extravagant, but it was his. It had the perfect amount of space, a small garden in front, and a quiet neighborhood where everyone seemed to know each other. Yet no one interfered in anyone else's business. It was the kind of place where one could enjoy peace, privacy, and a sense of security, which mattered a lot to Alex, who spent a lot of time working from home. Alex worked in technology. He had always been fascinated by computers and coding since he was a teenager. While many of his friends spent their free time watching TV or hanging out, Alex would be tinkering with gadgets, figuring out ways to make his home smarter. He wasn't rich, but he had turned his house into a personal smart home project. With lights, locks, cameras, and alarms that could be controlled from his phone or laptop, to Alex, it wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to feel safe and organized. He liked the idea that if something unusual happened, he could handle it quickly without panicking. Living in the neighborhood had its perks, but it also meant dealing with the Homeowners Association, or HOA. The HOA was a group of people elected by the residents to manage shared responsibilities, like maintaining common areas and enforcing community rules. Most of the time, their involvement was minimal, and Alex didn't mind. But over the years, he had noticed that the HOA liked to overstep sometimes. They could be very strict about appearances, such as what color you could paint your door or whether your lawn looked perfect. And they had a way of making small issues feel like big emergencies. Alex usually stayed out of HOA matters. He didn't attend meetings often, didn't volunteer for committees, and rarely argued with their rules as long as he could comply. He liked to keep his life simple, but there were moments when he did feel frustration. A few months ago, the HOA had sent a notice that they would inspect all security systems in the neighborhood, supposedly to ensure that everyone's homes were safe. Alex had found that slightly unnecessary. After all, his systems were self-installed and fully automated. But he didn't raise a fuss at the time. He simply filed the notice away in his digital folder and moved on. That morning, everything seemed normal. Alex finished his work a little earlier than usual and decided to take a short walk before heading home. The sky was clear, the sun was shining, and the air had that crisp feel of early spring. He liked walking through his neighborhood, greeting a few neighbors along the way, and enjoying the simple rhythm of suburban life. But when he returned home, his peaceful routine was about to be disrupted. As Alex approached the front door, something looked different. At first, he couldn't put his finger on it. The garden looked the same, the mail was in its place, and the windows were just as he had left them. But the door handle seemed unfamiliar. He tried turning it and it wouldn't budge. The key he always used didn't work. He pulled the keychain out, tried a few other keys, but nothing worked. His heart started to beat a little faster. Something was definitely wrong. Confused, he looked around. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no scratches, no evidence of theft, but the lock was clearly not his. Someone had changed it. He crouched down to inspect it and noticed a small tag with the HOAS logo. That's when he realized the HOA had changed the locks. Alex leaned back against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. They couldn't just tell me, he muttered to himself. He had always tried to follow the rules, paid all his fees on time, and kept the house in good shape. Yet here he was, locked out of his own home with no warning, no explanation other than a vague note in his mailbox that he hadn't even seen yet. The immediate reaction was frustration. He thought about calling the HOA office, but then remembered past interactions. They were rarely helpful on short notice. Most of the time, any issue required emails, forms, and waiting periods. He pulled out his phone and called the number on the tag. The receptionist answered calm and polite, as if this were a normal day. "Yes, sir. The HOA scheduled this lock change last week." Notices were sent. Alex froze. Notices sent? He hadn't received anything. No emails, no letters, no calls. Just a silent, automated replacement of his personal property. As he hung up, Alex's mind started racing. How could they do this without his consent? He remembered the notice about security inspections. Could this be related? Or had someone just decided on a whim to make a change without thinking about the consequences? Either way, Alex knew that the situation was far from simple. Then a realization hit him, and his stomach sank. His security system, the system he had spent months coding and calibrating, wasn't just a simple alarm. It was integrated with the locks, cameras, sensors, and notifications. Any unexpected change in the locks could trigger unexpected behaviors in the system, and now that the HOA had changed the lock without knowing, there was a very real chance that his security system could have been activated or worse. Misbehaving in ways that could make things more complicated, Alex took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. He was a problem solver by nature. Panicking wouldn't help. He remembered how months ago he had designed the system to allow him remote access in case of emergencies. That meant he had tools to assess the situation even without physically entering the house, but only if the system recognized him. What he didn't yet know was how the HOA's intervention had affected that recognition. The neighborhood itself, usually calm and quiet, now felt tense to Alex. Every movement he noticed the wind rustling leaves. A car passing slowly, even the distant bark of a dog, seemed amplified. He imagined what might happen if the system misinterpreted these signals. Alarms could go off, notifications could flood his phone, or worse, the locks could refuse entry completely. The peaceful rhythm of his life was suddenly replaced with uncertainty. As he leaned against the door, he began replaying past interactions with the HOA in his mind. There had been small disagreements about landscaping, mailbox placement, and paint colors, but never anything like this. Never a situation where they unilaterally intervened in such a personal and critical part of his home. Alex realized that while he had prepared for almost every technical scenario, he had never considered that a human, well-meaning or not, could inadvertently create chaos in his system. For the first time in a long while, Alex felt a mix of frustration and curiosity. He had a challenge on his hands, and he loved challenges, especially when they combined logic, technology, and problem-solving. But this one was different. It wasn't a coding bug he could fix with a few lines of code. It was a real-life confrontation between human error, technology, and personal property, and it was happening right at his front door. Alex sat down on the small porch, trying to think logically. He pulled out his laptop, connected to his home network remotely, and attempted to access the system. The screen lit up, but immediately he noticed irregularities. Notifications were coming in that he had never programmed. Sensors that should have been silent were sending alerts. Something about the lock change had triggered a series of automated responses he hadn't anticipated. The system, designed to protect, was now complicating matters. Despite the confusion, a sense of determination began to rise in Alex. This was not the first time he had faced a technical problem, and it wouldn't be the last. He prided himself on staying calm under pressure, analyzing situations step by step, and finding solutions that others might miss. The HOA had made a mistake, yes, but Alex knew that mistakes could be fixed with the right approach. He leaned back, sipping the now cooling coffee he had brought from home, and allowed himself a small, wry smile. He had always loved puzzles, and right now, locked out of his own home, facing an unexpected interference with his carefully crafted security system, Alex realized he was about to face one of the most unusual puzzles of his life. The story of that day was just beginning, and Alex had no idea how far it would go or how much it would test his patience, skills, and understanding of human behavior. But he knew one thing for certain: he was not going to back down. And he was not going to let a simple lock replacement by the HOA get the better of him. Alex had always been someone who valued order, predictability, and control over his environment. He liked routines, the small rituals that gave his life a sense of stability. Every morning he would wake up to the soft hum of his alarm, make himself a cup of coffee, and sit by the window in his modest suburban home, watching the world slowly come to life. The house was not particularly large or luxurious, but it was perfectly suited to him. Its small garden offered a touch of greenery and calm. The quiet streets of his neighborhood provided a sense of security he treasured. For Alex, this house wasn't just a place to live, it was a sanctuary. A personal space where he could retreat from the constant noise of the outside world and focus on his work and personal projects. Alex worked in technology, a field that suited his curious and analytical nature. From a young age, he had been fascinated by computers and coding, often spending hours on end dissecting programs or building simple gadgets from scratch. His friends had different interests. Some played sports, others spent their time on social media, but Alex found satisfaction in problem solving and experimenting with technology. Over the years, he had turned his modest home into a smart house, complete with automated lights, security cameras, and sophisticated locks that he could control remotely. Each system was carefully coded and customized to his preferences, and he took pride in knowing that he could manage every corner of his home from his laptop or smartphone. To Alex, these systems were more than just convenience. They were a means of control, protection, and peace of mind. Living in a suburban community also meant dealing with the Homeowners Association (HOA), a group responsible for maintaining common areas and enforcing neighborhood rules. Most of the time, interactions with the HOA were minimal, and Alex didn't mind them. They maintained the lawns, kept the streets clean, and ensured that the community adhered to certain standards. However, he had grown wary over time of the HOA's tendency to micromanage. They often sent notices about minor issues, from paint colors to mailbox placements, and seemed to relish correcting residents for even the smallest deviations from their rules. Alex had learned to navigate these interactions carefully, often complying quietly while keeping a mental note of their strictness. That particular morning started like any other. The air was crisp and fresh, and the sky was a clear, bright blue. Alex had finished his work a little earlier than usual and decided to take a short walk through the neighborhood, a ritual he enjoyed to clear his mind and stretch his legs. He greeted neighbors as he passed, exchanging friendly nods and brief conversations, appreciating the simple rhythm of suburban life. The familiar sights, the neatly trimmed lawns, the children playing on the sidewalks, the occasional dog walker, were comforting, reinforcing his sense that he was living in a well-ordered, safe environment. But as Alex returned to his house, something immediately felt off. The small garden and the exterior of the house looked the same, yet the front door caught his attention. He approached it slowly, expecting the usual comfort of familiarity, only to find that the lock looked different. Frowning, he tried his key, but it didn't turn. He tried several others from his keychain, hoping one would fit, but none worked. A sinking feeling began to form in his stomach. Someone had changed the lock. Alex's first reaction was confusion, quickly followed by frustration. He looked around for any signs of forced entry scratches, broken glass, or any indication that someone had broken into his home, but found nothing. The new lock had been installed cleanly and professionally. A small metal tag with the HOAS logo was attached to the lock. Alex realized the truth. The HOA had replaced his locks. His mind raced. Why had they done this without notifying him? He prided himself on following rules and paying dues promptly. The thought that the HOA could take such a direct action on his personal property without consent felt intrusive and unfair. He took a deep breath, attempting to calm himself before reaching for his phone to call their office. When he dialed the number on the tag, the receptionist answered in a polite, almost indifferent tone. "Yes, sir. The HOA scheduled this lock change last week. Notices were sent," she said. Alex froze. Notices? He had received no email, no letter, no call, nothing. I never got any notification," he replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. The receptionist offered only a standard explanation, apologizing for any inconvenience but insisting the change had been necessary. As Alex hung up, more pressing concern began to surface. His home security system, one he had painstakingly coded and refined, was fully integrated with the locks. Any unexpected change could trigger unforeseen reactions in the system. He felt a pang of anxiety. The system was designed to protect, not to trap him outside his own home. He had spent months programming responses for emergencies, but this situation was unprecedented. He crouched down and inspected the lock further, trying to assess if he could manually override it. But the system's integration meant that even physical tampering could cause digital complications. He remembered the HOA's recent notice about security inspections. Could this lock change be related? Or had someone simply made an executive decision without considering the technology in his home? Either scenario seemed possible, and both were alarming. Sitting on the porch with his laptop connected remotely to his home network, Alex began to analyze the situation. Notifications flooded his screen, signaling that sensors were triggered and systems were responding as if a potential threat had entered his property. The security cameras were active, lights were flashing in program sequences, and automated messages were being prepared to alert him of breaches, all of which he had never intended. For this kind of situation, the very system designed to give him control was now complicating the problem, creating confusion where there should have been safety. Despite the rising tension, Alex felt a familiar spark of determination. He was a problem solver, someone who thrived on challenges and logic puzzles. While the situation was frustrating and unusual, it also offered a unique test of his skills. He knew that with careful analysis and methodical action, he could regain control. The key was to stay calm and think several steps ahead. As he sipped the now cooling coffee he had brought outside, Alex reflected on the unexpected nature of the day. A simple morning routine had spiraled into a situation that combined human error, technology, and property rights. He realized that while technology could empower and protect, it could also introduce new challenges when others intervened without. Understanding the system, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the front yard. Alex's neighbors continued their routines, unaware of the small but intense drama unfolding at his doorstep. And while the day's events were frustrating, Alex felt a quiet excitement beneath his annoyance. He had always loved puzzles. This was one of the most complex and real-life puzzles he had ever faced. Sitting on the porch, his laptop open and his mind focused, Alex made a silent promise to himself. He would regain access to his home. He would address the HOA's overreach in a logical, effective way. And above all, he would ensure that his systems and his home remained under his control. The story of that day was only beginning, but Alex was ready. His experience, patience, and skills would be tested in ways he had never imagined. Yet he felt a quiet confidence that no matter how complicated things became, he would find a solution. The challenge ahead was daunting. But for Alex, it was also an opportunity to prove that careful thinking, technical knowledge, and perseverance could overcome even the most unexpected obstacles. Alex spent the next few hours trying to figure out the situation from outside his own house. Sitting on the porch with his laptop open, he stared at the security system's dashboard, which was flooding him with alerts. Motion detectors were going off, doors were reporting strange statuses, and the cameras were switching on and off, as if the house itself were confused. Every time he tried to access the locks remotely, the system seemed to push back, refusing commands that usually worked instantly. The more Alex looked at it, the more he realized that the HOA had unknowingly triggered multiple layers of the automated security system when they changed the HOA. It wasn't just frustrating, it was alarming. The system was designed to respond to unauthorized access, but in this case, the intruder was actually a human intervention by someone who meant no harm. The code he had written so meticulously now seemed like it had a mind of its own. Cameras rotated, lights flashed in different patterns, and alarms that he had disabled for maintenance suddenly reactivated. He couldn't enter the house, yet the house itself was behaving as if it were under attack. Alex leaned back on the porch chair, running a hand through his hair. This was a different kind of problem than a simple coding error or a device malfunction. It was a combination of technology, human action, and miscommunication. And unlike most technical problems, he couldn't just shut it down or reboot it. He had to navigate the system carefully, step by step, to prevent further complications. He took a deep breath and began analyzing the system in layers, trying to isolate which triggers had been activated by the HOA's lock change as he worked. Neighbors began to notice the unusual activity at Alex's house. Lights were blinking in strange sequences. Alarms were beeping intermittently. Cameras were rotating in ways that made it obvious something unusual was happening. One by one, a few neighbors came closer, curious but cautious. Alex waved them off, explaining quickly that it was a personal issue with his security system and that everything was fine. Most of them nodded politely and walked away, but he could sense the whispers. Some looked concerned, some amused. Alex didn't mind. He had bigger problems to solve. The system's logs were his first clue. Each entry showed precise times when sensors were triggered, which devices attempted to communicate, and how the lock interacted with the automation protocols. He noticed a pattern. The system treated the new lock as an unknown entity, which activated several security measures automatically. Lights turned on as a deterrent, alarms prepared notifications, and cameras pivoted toward every doorway. In short, the system had gone into overdrive. Perceiving a security breach that didn't exist, Alex realized that if he tried to physically force the door open, could trigger a complete lockdown. The system had a failsafe he had coded himself to prevent break-ins, but in this case, it would lock down all access points until it received a specific override command. That override existed, but using it required careful entry into the system's back-end interface. One wrong command, and the house could enter full lockdown, making it even harder to regain access. He exhaled slowly, knowing he had to proceed methodically. He started by disabling the cameras temporarily, isolating each sensor, and logging the system's response to each command. It was tedious technical work, but Alex enjoyed challenges like this. He had spent years training himself to think logically and remain calm under pressure. Every alert, every flashing light, every alarm was a puzzle piece. And Alex methodically began assembling the solution. Hours passed. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the porch. Alex hadn't eaten since lunch, hadn't moved much, but he was too focused to care. He analyzed the coding sequence that controlled the locks, tracing the flow of commands and identifying the exact point where the system was rejecting his inputs. He discovered that the HOA's lock had a slightly different electronic signature. The system read it as an unknown device, which triggered an automated lockdown protocol that Alex had only vaguely tested. It was clever, almost ingenious, but now it was a barrier to his own entry. While Alex worked, he considered the HOA's perspective. They hadn't known the potential consequences of their action. To them, replacing the lock might have seemed like a routine maintenance task. They didn't realize that Alex had integrated the lock into a larger network of security protocols. The thought reminded him that technology was powerful, but only if those interacting with it understood its complexity. A well-meaning action without understanding could cause chaos, just as it had in this case. Determined not to escalate the situation with the HOA yet, Alex focused entirely on regaining access first. He dug deeper into the code, opening multiple windows and analyzing communication logs between the lock and the main system. There were error codes he recognized, sequences he had written to prevent unauthorized access, and triggers for alarm notifications. He began typing commands carefully, testing one action at a time, checking for system responses, recording each result. At one point, a loud alarm blared from the house. Alex jumped, startled. The system had misinterpreted a test command as an intrusion attempt. The neighbors who had been watching from a distance now looked worried. Alex quickly typed the correct override commands, silencing the alarm and stabilizing the system temporarily. It was a small victory, but an important one. He realized that regaining control wouldn't be a matter of brute force. It would require patience, understanding, and precision. As the evening grew darker, the atmosphere around Alex's house changed. Streetlights came on, and the quiet suburb that had felt so peaceful earlier now felt tense. Every movement, every passing car seemed amplified. He noticed that the system was now starting to adjust to the new lock, recognizing it as a valid device. But it still required a final series of commands to fully restore normal operation. One misstep, and the system could reset itself, forcing him to start over. Alex paused for a moment, stretching his arms and rubbing his eyes. He realized how much he had underestimated the complexity of his own creation when human intervention was introduced. His pride in building a highly secure automated home came with the responsibility of managing unexpected events. This was a reminder that even the most sophisticated systems were vulnerable to human error or miscommunication. He returned to his laptop, taking a step-by-step approach. First, he isolated the lock from the other devices, then sent a signal to the main system to acknowledge its electronic signature. Slowly, the system began to calm. Cameras returned to standby mode, alarms were disarmed, and notifications stopped flooding his phone. Each successful step felt like progress, but Alex knew he wasn't done yet. Finally, after what felt like hours, he initiated the sequence that allowed the lock to accept remote commands fully. His heart raced as he watched the interface confirm the override. The lock clicked, and he turned the key. It moved smoothly this time. Alex pushed the door open and stepped inside, relieved to be back in his own home. Once inside, he surveyed the house. Nothing had been damaged, but the automated systems were still in a semi-alert state. He spent the next hour reviewing logs, resetting triggers, and ensuring that all components were functioning properly. By the time he was done, the house was stable again, operating exactly as he had programmed it: secure, responsive, and predictable. Alex sank into his chair, exhausted but satisfied. The situation had been tense, frustrating, and at times almost overwhelming. Yet it had also reminded him of the importance of vigilance, patience, and careful problem-solving. It was a real-life test of his technical skills, his ability to remain calm under pressure, and his capacity to think logically when confronted with unexpected challenges. He knew that the HOA's action, though unintentional, had created a scenario he would never forget. It was a lesson in the intersection of technology and human behavior, a reminder that even well-meaning interventions could have unintended consequences when systems were complex and sensitive. But most importantly, he had proven to himself that no challenge, no matter how frustrating, was insurmountable if approached with clarity, logic, and determination. As he finally leaned back and exhaled deeply, Alex allowed himself a small smile. He had solved the immediate problem. The house was secure, the system was stable, and he had regained control. But he also knew that the events of the day were far from over. The next steps: dressing the HOA, preventing future incidents, and reflecting on what had happened would require as much care and thought as the technical challenge he had just overcome. For now, though he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction, he had faced a complex and unpredictable situation and had emerged successful. And as the sun set behind the trees lining the quiet suburban streets, Alex felt a renewed sense of confidence in his abilities both as a coder and as a homeowner who refused to be overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control. Once Alex had regained control of his home and stabilized the security system, he knew the day's challenges were far from over. While the technical battle had been won, the underlying problem, how the HOA had unilaterally changed his lock, still needed to be addressed. He could not ignore it. If he did, it was only a matter of time before another well-intentioned but disruptive intervention occurred. He understood that the next step required a combination of tact, clarity, and firmness. Alex sat at his dining table, his laptop open, reviewing every log and detail from the morning's chaos. He had meticulously documented each alert, each triggered sequence, and each anomaly caused by the lock change. The system had behaved exactly as it was designed to, interpreting the new lock as an unauthorized device and triggering multiple safeguards. He realized that if he could present the data logically, calmly, and factually, he could explain to the HOA their actions had serious consequences. After drafting a detailed message to the HOA board, Alex took a moment to gather his thoughts. He wanted to ensure that his tone was firm but not hostile. Angry messages could escalate the situation unnecessarily. He wanted the HOA to understand the technical risks they had created. He also knew that this was an opportunity to educate them gently, but clearly about the potential consequences of intervening in technology and integrated homes. Once he was ready, he called the HOA office. The receptionist answered, and he requested to speak with the board president. A short wait later, he was connected. "Hello, this is Alex, resident at 48 Maple Lane. I'd like to discuss the lock change that occurred this morning," he said, his voice steady. There was a brief pause on the other end. "Yes, Mr. Alex, the board president will speak with you in a moment," the receptionist replied. When the president came on the line, Alex began calmly explaining the situation. He walked them through the events of the morning, how he discovered the new lock, how the security system reacted, and the specific alerts and lockdown protocols that had been triggered. He described the system in detail, emphasizing that it was a highly customized setup, carefully coded to respond to specific inputs. Alex pointed out that, while their intention might have been to ensure security, their actions had inadvertently created a potentially hazardous scenario as he spoke. He noticed a change in tone on the other end. The president, who had initially sounded defensive, became more attentive, asking questions about how the system worked and why the lock replacement caused issues. Alex explained that the system's logic was straightforward. Any unrecognized device could trigger alerts, alarms, and temporary lockouts. What they had seen as a simple maintenance task had, in reality, been interpreted by his system as a security breach. The president asked whether any damage had occurred. Alex reassured them that the house was unharmed and that no safety protocols had been compromised. He explained that he had successfully regained control, but emphasized that the potential for escalation was high if such actions were repeated. He described scenarios where, had he not been able to access the system remotely, the house could have fully locked down, preventing entry or even triggering emergency responses unnecessarily. After listening carefully, the HOA president expressed regret, acknowledging that they had not understood the complexity of Alex's setup. "We truly didn't realize the potential consequences," the president admitted. "We were acting in what we thought was everyone's best interest." Alex nodded silently to himself. He recognized that while their lack of awareness had caused a serious problem, it was not malicious intent. Still, it reinforced a lesson he had long understood. Technology and human intervention did not always mix well without communication. Alex proposed a solution. He offered to walk the board through his system in person, demonstrating how it worked and how unauthorized changes could trigger automated responses. By showing them, he hoped to prevent future incidents and create a shared understanding. The president agreed, suggesting that a small meeting at Alex's home could be arranged for later in the week. Alex accepted, feeling satisfied that a proactive approach could prevent further misunderstandings. With the call concluded, Alex allowed himself a brief moment to relax. The tension of the morning had given way to a sense of accomplishment. He had not only solved the immediate technical issue, but had also taken steps toward addressing the human element of the problem. Yet, he knew that resolving the HOA situation fully would require careful follow-up and perhaps a little diplomacy. As the evening wore on, Alex turned his attention back to his home. He walked through each room, checking the sensors, the cameras, and the automated lights. Everything was functioning as intended, responding to his commands without error. The house was calm again, the alarms silent, and the system logs clean. He felt a wave of relief. For the first time since the morning's chaos, he could breathe. Yet, he also reflected on how vulnerable even a sophisticated system could be to human error. The HOA had meant well, but their lack of knowledge had introduced confusion, stress, and risk. Alex realized that technology could empower homeowners, but only when everyone involved understood its limitations. Communication was as essential as coding. An awareness of how systems interacted with human intervention was critical. The next day, Alex spent time preparing for the upcoming meeting with the HOA board. He created a visual guide explaining the system's components, how the locks interacted with the security protocols, and the potential risks of uncoordinated interventions. He included examples from the morning's events showing exactly what had happened and how the system had responded. By presenting the information visually and factually, he hoped to bridge the gap between technical complexity and everyday understanding. When the meeting finally took place, a small group from the HOA arrived at Alex's home. He welcomed them politely, showing them the house and guiding them through the security system. As he demonstrated the interactions between the locks, cameras, and alarms, he could see their reactions shift from curiosity to genuine understanding. They asked questions about how the system responded, how overrides worked, and what precautions were necessary to avoid triggering unwanted alerts. Alex took care to explain each aspect in simple terms, avoiding technical jargon wherever possible. He wanted them to grasp the key points without feeling overwhelmed. By the end of the demonstration, it was clear that the board members had gained a new appreciation for the potential impact of their decisions on technologically integrated homes. They expressed gratitude for his patience and willingness to educate them. Acknowledging that future interventions would be handled differently, the meeting concluded with an agreement. Any maintenance, inspections, or modifications involving Alex's property would be coordinated with him in advance. The HOA committed to sending notices, obtaining consent, and consulting with Alex before taking any action. It was a small but significant victory. Not only had Alex regained control over his home, but he had also established clear boundaries and communication channels to prevent similar incidents. Later that evening, Alex reflected on the entire ordeal. The situation had been stressful, technically complex, and emotionally taxing, yet it had also been an opportunity for growth. He had demonstrated his problem-solving skills, his ability to remain calm under pressure, and his capacity to communicate complex ideas effectively. He had also highlighted the importance of collaboration, understanding, and foresight when technology intersects with human decisions. Alex realized that the morning's chaos had ultimately strengthened his sense of confidence. He knew that unexpected challenges would arise in the future, but he also knew that with patience, preparation, and careful thought, he could face them successfully. The day had been a reminder that technology, while powerful, required careful management, especially when others were involved. As he sat in his living room, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, Alex felt a sense of closure. The locks had been restored, the system stabilized, and the HOA had learned an important lesson. He knew there might be minor adjustments in the future, but the immediate crisis had been resolved. For Alex, this was not just a technical victory, it was a reaffirmation of his skills, his patience, and his ability to navigate complex situations with clarity and precision. The evening was quiet, the neighborhood calm, and for the first time in hours, Alex allowed himself to relax completely. He reflected on the lessons of the day, the importance of preparation, the value of communication, and the power of staying calm under pressure. While the situation had been unexpected, it had ultimately led to greater understanding, both for him and for the HOA. And as he finally leaned back, letting the house return to its usual rhythm, Alex felt a renewed sense of confidence and readiness for whatever challenges might come next. In the days that followed the lock incident, Alex found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. The chaos of the morning, the tension with the HOA, and the complex interactions with his security system had left a lasting impression. While the situation had been stressful, it had also provided him with valuable insights into both technology and human behavior. Alex realized that even the most carefully designed systems were only as effective as the people who understood and respected them. For Alex, the first lesson was the importance of clear communication. The HOA's well-intentioned lock change had caused a cascade of complications simply because there had been no prior discussion. He understood now more than ever that coordination between humans and technology was essential. It wasn't enough to have a perfectly coded system if the people around him were unaware of how it functioned. This was a lesson that extended beyond his own experience. It was a principle he decided to share with his neighbors. He began by reaching out to several residents in the community, explaining in simple terms how technology could both protect and complicate home life if not properly understood. He described his own experience, detailing how the security system had reacted to the unanticipated lock replacement and why it had been so important to follow proper procedures. Neighbors listened intently, some surprised by the complexity of modern home security, others intrigued by the careful thought and coding that Alex had invested in his systems. Alex also wrote a short guide, a practical document that outlined how residents could approach technological upgrades or interventions in their homes. He included tips on how to communicate with the HOA, what kinds of permissions to request, and how to document systems to prevent misunderstandings. He even provided basic advice on simple security practices, making sure the guide was accessible and easy to follow. By doing this, he not only helped his neighbors avoid similar problems, but he also strengthened the sense of community around responsible technology use. While engaging with neighbors, Alex began to reflect on his own approach to technology. He had always prided himself on being meticulous, cautious, and thoughtful in his coding. But the incident with the HOA revealed a new dimension: the importance of anticipating human error. Even the most secure system could be disrupted by actions that were logical from a human perspective but unpredictable for a machine. He realized that technology required both technical skill and foresight about how people might interact with it. Alex also used the experience as an opportunity to strengthen his own systems. After reviewing the logs and analyzing the alerts, he decided to add new protocols that could handle unexpected human interventions more gracefully. He created warning systems that would notify him immediately, but avoid triggering full lockdowns unnecessarily. He refined the override commands, making them more accessible and flexible in emergency situations. This process took time, patience, and careful thought, but Alex enjoyed the challenge. Each adjustment was a way to learn, improve, and prepare for the future. The HOA, for its part, maintained a new level of respect for Alex's expertise. They continued to enforce community rules, but they approached his property with caution and understanding. Whenever maintenance or inspections were necessary, they coordinated with him in advance, ensuring that no surprises would occur. Alex felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his efforts had not only resolved the immediate conflict, but had also led to lasting improvements in communication and procedures. Beyond the technical and administrative lessons, Alex found himself reflecting on patience and emotional control. The morning's events had tested his ability to remain calm under pressure, to think logically when faced with multiple unexpected variables, and to manage both human and technological challenges simultaneously. He realized that staying composed had been crucial to successfully navigating the situation. If he had reacted impulsively, the outcomes could have been far worse. The experience reinforced his belief in the value of careful, methodical thinking. As the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm, Alex felt a renewed sense of confidence. He knew that unexpected situations could arise at any time, whether caused by technology, human error, or a combination of both. But he also knew that he was capable of handling them. His experience had given him practical skills, reinforced his problem-solving abilities, and deepened his understanding of how humans and technology could coexist effectively. In the evenings, Alex would often sit on his porch, sipping coffee, watching the streetlights flicker on as the sun set. The neighborhood, once again calm and peaceful, felt different to him now. He had seen how quickly normal routines could be disrupted and how even small actions could have significant consequences. Yet he also saw the value of preparation, knowledge, and clear communication. The quiet streets now seemed like a reminder of both the fragility and resilience of everyday life. Alex's interactions with the HOA also taught him something about human nature. They were not malicious. They were simply unaware of the full impact of their actions. The incident had highlighted the importance of empathy, patience, and constructive dialogue. By approaching the situation calmly and presenting clear information, he had been able to resolve a conflict that could have escalated into ongoing tension. The experience strengthened his belief that misunderstandings, even serious ones, could often be resolved through communication and education rather than confrontation. He also began documenting the incident more formally, creating a detailed case study of what had happened, why it had occurred, and what measures were necessary to prevent future problems. The case study included the sequence of events, the technical details of the security system, and the steps he had taken to regain control. He also included recommendations for homeowners, developers, and HOA boards, emphasizing the importance of understanding how technology integrates into modern homes. And sharing this documentation with friends, colleagues, and interested neighbors, Alex found that his experience resonated with others. Many people were surprised to learn how easily human intervention could disrupt automated systems and how important coordination was in preventing such disruptions. His story became an example of the intersection between technology, communication, and community responsibility. Through it all, Alex maintained a sense of balance. He continued to enjoy his routines, his work, and his quiet suburban life. But he did so with greater awareness and preparedness. He implemented new systems thoughtfully, communicated more proactively, and encouraged others to do the same. The experience had not only been a test of his technical skill, but also a lesson in patience, responsibility, and community engagement. The incident also left Alex with a subtle but lasting sense of pride. He had faced a situation that was entirely unexpected, managed complex technical systems under stress, and resolved a conflict with authority figures diplomatically. The combination of technical expertise, logical thinking, and effective communication had allowed him to turn a potentially negative event into a learning opportunity and a positive outcome. Looking back, Alex realized that the day of the lock change had been transformative in more ways than one. It had reminded him of the importance of being proactive, the value of clear communication, and the need to anticipate the unexpected. It had tested his technical knowledge, patience, and problem-solving skills, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Finally, as he sat in his living room, watching the sun set behind the trees, Alex allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The neighborhood was calm, his home secure, and his systems functioning perfectly. He thought about the lessons he had learned, the improvements he had made, and the relationships he had strengthened. The experience had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding, leaving him better prepared for the future and more aware of the delicate balance between technology, human action, and communication. Alex knew that life would continue to present challenges, some technical, some human, and some a combination of both. But he also knew that he was ready. Equipped with his skills, his patience, and his experience, he could face unexpected problems with calm and confidence. The lock incident had ended, but the lessons it taught him would stay with him forever. And as he leaned back, sipping his coffee and listening to the quiet sounds of his neighborhood, Alex felt a sense of satisfaction, accomplishment, and readiness for whatever the future might bring.